episode 127 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host, Ben Eagle, and for today's episode, I travelled up to Suffolk. Yes, I actually did a face-to-face interview. They are rare these days. I went to Wakelyns, which is famous for its agroforestry setup, and I spoke to Henrietta Inman there, who is a baker and a cook, and recently started at the new bakery based at Wakelyns. Henrietta trained as a pastry chef, working at, among other places, the Lanesborough Hotel in London. She is the author of The Natural Baker and Clean Cakes. And I started by asking her about Wakelyns itself. Can you just give us a bit of background to Wakelyns for anyone who doesn't know about it?
Yes. Well, yeah, definitely Google it. The website is great and there's so much information on there. But it's a 56-acre agroforestry farm in Fressingfield in North Suffolk. It is one of the UK's, if not Europe's, I think, most diverse agroforestry farms. Started by Martin and Anne Wolfe they actually bought the farm in 1992 when they were both living in Switzerland, but didn't actually move here till, I think, 1995, 97. It was actually, I think it's really important to say, it was actually bought in their retirement. So this beautiful, wonderful place was their retirement project, which is quite amazing. Shows what amazing people they were. Martin was a plant pathologist, so working on diseases in plants. But then in his retirement, he really wanted to focus on more sustainable ways of farming, and he'd heard a bit about agroforestry, sort of, quite perhaps more basic methods, so almond trees and wheat in Spain and things, but his sort of real fascination was always diversity, and this was a place where he experimented with all of that. So, we're now sort of in Hazelfield.
Yeah, I was going to say, should we go for a wander in one of the alleys?
Yeah, have a wander. Let's go this way. So you'll see when we go around, there's a huge amount of diversity within and among the crops. So
this row, for example, this is just being cultivated. This must be...
It's about 12
metres?
Yeah.
So they're designed for 12-metre rows.
Yeah, but quite small. So you saw, we just came out of the tractor barn where you saw the plot combine. So it was really mostly for their trials they were doing, and the plot combine would have been used. Lots of farmers have come here now and been learning from it, and with their larger machinery they're designing their agroforestry with much wider alleys. This last year there was some squash grown here by Marion, who's been a friend of the farm for years and years and years, and so now it's being cultivated, and then it will go probably into a 1 to 2 year lay. And then there'll be, I'm not sure what's next in the rotation, but either lentils or wheat. And that's the last hazel tree line, and now we're going into Homefield, which is a big mix. In terms of the trees, it's a big mix of there's about 40 different varieties of apples, at least about 6 pears, lots and lots of plums, quince, see buckthorn, but not as many as you, but enough, I think, to manage, because they're so difficult to harvest. Rose hips, and then in terms of the crops, a lot of it is in ley this year, in the fertility building ley, but really excitingly...
Who are the chairs for?
Probably for some of the people working on the community supported agriculture. So this was started.
So we're now just going towards. Some. Oh wow, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
Got beans, lettuces. Oh, beetroot, brilliant! Wow.
Kale,
kohlrabi. I'll take a photo of this, listeners, and I'll put it in the notes, because that is quite. That's quite
wonderful,
sharp.
right?
When was this CSA started?
They started. The land is so wet after Christmas, so probably March, I reckon they got onto the land, and it's no dig. They started cutting and turning the turf basically, and they operate as CSA, a community supported agriculture scheme. So they have 30 shares, and people will buy those shares. But it's really important. But they're not just getting a veg box a week. They are getting to know Holly and Chloe and Rachel, and they're also able to come here and learn from them, and learn about growing and connect to the land, connect to where their food is coming from, and that's like a big part of what we're trying to do in the bakery as well.
Okay.
So they give us 2 shares a week, which is part of their sort of rent. So yeah, the farm owners are making it really sustainable and welcoming for all of us. And they've also sown some buckwheat in the next 2 alleys next to them this year, because we've got a big couch grass problem.
Okay.
So hopefully that's going to help to suppress it. And they're going to grow more vegetables soon, next year, which is really exciting. We're hoping to do an alley of, looks quite big when you're looking at it, it's about 2 acres. We're hoping to do an alley of flowers.
Okay.
A sort of collaborative alley. So at the moment, we do our bread subscription in the bakery, and people sign up to get a loaf a week. And when the CSA girls started taking on shares, lots of people who already had subscribed to our bread subscription got veg. So we put our bread in their veg boxes, and we really want to put a nice posy of flowers in. Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna start talking about you, actually. That's okay. So you grew up in Suffolk.
Yes. Yeah, I grew up about half an hour away from Wakelyns, but only found out about it about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm more in East Suffolk. And yeah, my mother had a vegetable garden, and my father was a publisher, actually, and we have a lot of books, recipe books all over the house. So food has always been a big part of my life, I think.
Is that what he specialised in terms of publishing? He
did food books, but also sort of, well, he's done various things, but in his last few jobs it was, I guess, lifestyle food and interiors and lots of flowers, lots and lots. So, yeah. And then went to Edinburgh University, did French and Italian, but always felt, because they're such sort of gastronomic countries, that it might then lead me to doing something in food in my sort of work life.
What are your sort of earliest food memories?
Oh God. I think apparently it's not so much a memory, it's more when I look at photo albums, I guess I remember it, I think. Everyone always said that my friend Joe and I were always the last people the last children at the table at parties. And there's pictures of us we were just always eating, just food all over our faces. And and I think I often sort of get smells or sort of deja vu feelings, and it's sort of memories of food and things and places.
Tell me more about your time at Edinburgh.
So I read French and Italian, as I said, and I loved it there. I wanted to go there because the year before I'd visited some friends who had a house in Inverness, or just in Inverness-shire, in a place called near Aviemore, in the Highlands, and I loved it so much I wanted to go to university there. So I tried to get out walking and stuff when I could from university, and then really enjoyed it. I loved studying languages, because you don't just study literally the language and the grammar and everything, but you study the culture. So we did Italian and French film and poetry and fiction, and in some of my Italian courses we even did music. And just everything and anything. And then I went to live in France and Italy for a year, and sort of really immersed myself even more in the culture, and really loved being there and eating all of their wonderful food. Exactly. But yeah, I think that sort of stayed with me, and really, when I cook now, I think that food just is such an important part of our culture. And I think in France and Italy, it's still sort of really embedded in that, in their culture. But I feel maybe here it's slightly been lost a little.
Sorry, it's just one thing that's taken me in with this place is just the scale of it. Actually, it's
Yeah.
when you look at it from an aerial viewpoint, and it is honestly, it's surrounded. Wakelyns is surrounded by arable fields.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look enormous
Yeah.
on a map scale, but when you're within it, and I think it's something about trees, especially a lot of these broadleaves. It's you get that really unique sense of scale.
Yeah.
When you're underneath the canopy.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess Martin Land bought it in 1992, and didn't move here till 1997. But they were coming back and forth planting trees and things. So it is. I think that's terrible. 1992, 2020. It's very mature.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was born in 1990 and I'm 31. So
Exactly.
it's 2 years younger than me. So nearly 30 years.
Nearly 30 years. So yeah, and it's wonderful. I think it's very. Obviously, it's about the food and the farming and everything, but I think it's a whole system. It's sort of it's calming, and it's it really sort of makes you feel very grounded.
Yeah.
When you're here.
Literally, and it's.
Yeah.
I suppose it's stating the obvious, but it's very much the trees are the focus of the place.
Yeah.
So after Edinburgh, you moved to London for a new life.
Yeah.
What? Yeah,
crazy.
take me back to that time.
It was a bit mad. I did something called the Professional Patisserie Scholarship at Westminster Kingsway College, but that was sort of slightly based on the sort of patisserie scholarships they do in France, where they're actually more learning on the job as apprentices. So I went to work at the Lanesborough Hotel on Hyde Park Corner for 2 years as an apprentice, doing all the afternoon tea and sort of 500 scones a day and crazy sort of layered, very intricate pastries with a mousse and a jelly and a glaze and all that. But I loved it, and it gave me a really good sort of foundation in patisserie, but also in sort of surviving crazy kitchens.
Yeah.
But I think the whole sort of my whole time in kitchens, which was about 8 years, taught me that if you're in a good team, no matter how mad and crazy it is, I guess this is like with everything in life, if you've got good people around you, it's okay, and you can cope with the stress and stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's really key.
Yeah. So, yeah, I loved that, and then I went on to work in other kitchens in London, but sort of Italian restaurants and other places, but got quite tired and just needed a bit of a break, so moved back home for a bit, and started doing some farmers markets locally, and wrote my first book, which...
So is that still in print?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, fantastic.
It came out at a time... So it was all gluten-free and dairy-free and refined sugar-free.
Okay.
Which I would not... Yeah. I think it's... But I think that's all part of the growth and stuff, and it's...
That's interesting. Let's focus on that for a bit. So I take it. So did you go through a shift in mindset through that time as well? As a result, almost of exploring those ideas.
I think it was. I should show you lentils quickly.
Yeah.
I had quite a disordered eating period.
Okay.
For quite a long period of my life, from about 15 to quite recently.
Okay.
And I think that book was slightly a reflection of that. There was lots of, I definitely think at that period in time there was a lot of pressure in the media and lots of things about clean eating and various people, I'm not going to say names, but various sort of wellness people were talking about, oh, you've got to cut out gluten, you've got to cut out these things. I think I was definitely influenced by that. But at the same time, even though I was probably really limiting what I was eating, I still had this, like, my love of food never detracted from flavour or anything.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of, inverted commas, free from stuff is not very tasty. But I think I can stand by my word and say the stuff in my book was really tasty still. But yeah, and then I sort of, I think then what happened, I moved back to London and sort of was promoting my book and doing more freelance work, so supper clubs and things, and sort of became a bit more relaxed about food.
Okay.
And then my second book came out, which does have butter in it, and more. And during that time, I'd also been, because I'd been back to Suffolk, I'd also reconnected with farmers around here. So another agroforestry farm called Maple Farm, and started using more of their grains and things. Yeah, and got a bit more. Started to think a bit more about where my produce I was using and the ingredients I was using were coming from.
Okay.
Because in the hotels and restaurants I worked in, I hadn't even, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it like going through the shift, and when was there a defined point where you actually actively started thinking about the production side, the farming side?
Yeah, I think it was probably about maybe about 5 years ago, more like definitely more sort of, it all sort of cemented a bit more. And more recently, so 3 years ago I did a residency in Leighton and basically ran a restaurant for a year. It was 20 covers, very little, but it was really great and a really good learning process. But it was really about showcasing Suffolk farmers. My parents would come up with sort of eggs from Carroll down the road, and my mum would bring flowers from our garden, and I used a lot of produce from some people called Organic Lee in the Lee Valley, Sarah Green's Organics in Essex, and it was really about telling the story of these farmers through the food we were cooking, but also just because food grown in that way is just so much more delicious and joyful. And then from that I went on to open a restaurant called Stony Street, but I think, so that was a sort of continuation of that, and we were using Hodmedod's stuff and lots of UK farmers things. I talked a lot to Josiah, one of the co-founders of Hodmedod's, about ingredients to use, and also at this residency I started using the YQ, so that was when sort of stuff happened with Wakelyns.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was sort of also gradually getting more relaxed about food and things, but still very thinking about it a bit. I think it's very rare these days to actually meet somebody who's not thinking about their body image, or I think that having more of a connection to food and where it's coming from and to the people who've grown it, and I think all of those sort of connections along the food chain make it so much more fulfilling and nourishing, like in more ways than just nourishing your body, but everything, your heart and your soul.
Yeah.
And I think that's what something clicked. I visited Small Food Bakery sort of May last year and helped them for 2 weeks. It was sort of when I was talking to Kim, who was the first baker, Kimberly Bell, to use the YQ, and she had a wonderful relationship with Martin, and they sort of travelled all over to conferences and things talking about it, not just in farming systems, but its sort of influence on her, applying the sort of method of diversity to all systems and flexibility as well, because it's such a diverse and flexible crop. But yeah, it's such a beautiful bakery, and she's created such an amazing community, and something there when I was there sort of clicked, and I haven't looked back. Sort of.
So when, let's bring us more up to date, because you've been here at Wakelyns for, 5 months, something like that?
Yeah, we opened in mid-April, so a bit less than 5 months. But I came here a bit last year to help with harvesting of the fruit. We opened the bakery in April, and we're using not just the crops grown on the farm, so mostly the YQ and Q population wheats, but also our job is to harvest all the fruit and use the fruit grown on the farm. And also now we're very much linked to the CSA using all of their produce as well.
Yeah. You mentioned YQ and Q population wheats. I'm conscious that a lot of listeners, although we have talked about this before on previous shows, listeners, but
I bet you have.
I think, let's return to those. Can you just explain what that actually means?
Yeah, so in terms of the initials, the YQ stands for yield and quality, and the Q stands for quality, referring to baking quality, really. So that's sort of the protein content. But yes, they are both cross-composite populations, which, trying to put it most simply, means Martin worked here with the Organic Research Centre, and they basically crossed 20 different wheats every which way. So I like to think of it as 20 different parent plants crossed every which way, and then had 190 babies. So 190 different plants then in the field, which therefore creates a huge amount of diversity within the crop, and that diversity brings resilience. So if one of the plants can't do well has been affected by a pest or the climate or lack of water or too much water, the other plants in the other children will still be all right and survive, luckily. Also, because of its diversity, it's very flexible, so it's not just grown here, but it's grown on lots of other farms all over the UK now, because it can adapt to climates and different soil types and everything. So lots of people are growing it, and which is great. So we're spreading the YQ word.
Where are we walking next?
I'm going that way.
That way?
Yeah.
So what else is going on at Wakelyns? Because
In a bit of
it feels
new
like a real
phase.
time of change at the moment.
Yeah. So
Lots of new
very
exciting things.
Yeah. Very sadly, Anne died in 2016 and Martin in 2019. And before he died, he asked for a symposium to be held with lots of friends and family of Wakelyns to discuss the future.
Okay.
And the bakery was one of the things discussed, and bringing back more veg growing to Wakelyns, because Anne had done a lot of vegetable growing here. So now it's in sort of this next phase, inspired by many of the ideas discussed then. So with the bakery, and then there's the community supported agriculture, and then there's also Faye, who's called the woodland haberdasher.
It's probably the best job title anyone's ever
Yeah,
had
she's
ever.
great. Woodland haberdasher, artist and craftsman. So whereas we're using more of the food and agricultural side of the agroforestry system, Faye's using more of the materials.
Okay.
Although we do have a wood-fired oven and use the wood as well. But she's using the wood to make for wood carving. So there's a lot of beautiful spoons. We use them in the bakery too. And then she has been growing weld and woad for natural dyeing, and she also uses the different tree barks for more natural dyeing as well. And we are all sort of a bit like all the tree roots and things. We're all sort of interconnecting and working together and collaborating, sort of helping each other as a small community here, and trying to bring the farm is basically diversifying. So it's 56 acres, and it couldn't really economically to just produce food. It wouldn't really work.
Yeah.
So David and David Wolf and his brother Toby Wolf and their families have decided to very generously sort of welcome people here. So Maisie and I and the Real Veg CSA and Faye to come here and sort of add value to the farm here, use the produce from the farm here, welcome visitors to come and eat it here. And those are sort of the next steps, and they want to welcome more people. So if anyone listening would like to start a brewery or start making cider with all the apples, please, or bring some animals.
Yeah, that's
Please
true. That is
contact
one
us.
thing that. And you can come and stay at Wakelyns.
Yes, the beautiful, very old, I think 15th century farmhouse is available to rent. It has about, I think, 12 or 14 bedrooms or beds, and yeah, it's wonderful. And you can come and get food from the bakery and go and help the CSA girls, volunteer with them, and eventually we hope to have more accommodation as well. So some lay alley pods that will move in the alleys with the rotation. So we don't have animals yet, but we have the pods.
I don't know what else to ask. I think I've got loads on that. So, just say thank you so much for having me and showing me this very special place. And it's just nice to be. It's nice to be on a farm as well. You've encouraged me to go out back again and go out and do some more of these on the ground. Next time on the show, I'm speaking to the NFU's talent spokesman, Chris Cardell. So you can hope you can join me for that. But until then, have a great week.